Hello, everyone. Friends, the big turmoil in the markets is still going on. As of the opening day of the week, no matter where we look in the markets, we see there's some serious selling pressure. The selling pressure continues in the US stock market, Borsa Istanbul, gold, silver, and the cryptocurrency market. And we can say that, especially due to the impact of the Middle East, a crisis pricing is ongoing all around the world. Stock market investors are unhappy here. Those who invest in markets like gold and silver are also unhappy. And those who invest in the cryptocurrency market are just as unhappy. Of course, this unhappiness actually varies from person to person depending on the period. Those who took early action to exit the stock markets are happy during this process. People who exited the US stock market or Borsa Istanbul are happy. Or some say, good thing we sold silver early. While some people comment, look, silver prices have dropped by half and so on, others say, forget about all that, Selchuk. Tell us about gold prices. What's going to happen to gold? You said gold would go up. Gold isn't going up. Gold has dropped too. Come on, answer these questions too. There are people leaving comments like this as well. Of course, what we call unhappiness is a concept that changes from person to person and over time, because it's just not possible to please everyone at the same time. Tomorrow, if Borsa Istanbul goes up, for example, those people will say, but we sold, so what happens now? And so on. Or when gold starts going back up again, the comments will flip the other way. So what am I really trying to say? Here's what's important. When you develop discipline and build a portfolio within a medium-term trend structure, you should be able to sit back and calmly follow the markets. Now, when you look at the markets these days and ask who's making money and from which markets, it's actually much simpler to understand what's going on. We're in a period where almost no one is making money, and people are just trying to be among the minority who lose the least. Just look around you. Are there people who are happy with the stock market, with gold, or with silver? Evaluate your portfolio after considering that. And while you're making this assessment, if your risk tolerance is very low, if you're saying something like, I absolutely can't stand to lose, then you really shouldn't invest in any of these markets. Instead, you can just put your money in a time deposit and try to grow it there without any worries. But we need to face the reality that among these followed trends, markets may stumble in the short term, but continue their trends in the medium term. For example, products like gold and silver have made profits for their investors, but it hasn't always been a steadily rising chart. We've definitely seen declines, repeatedly, within short-term cycles lasting a few weeks. Those who didn't panic, didn't sell, and just sat back were rewarded with much greater gains and had the chance to grow their portfolios. Now, putting this aspect aside, when we ask what the current state of this ongoing global chaos is, we'll soon evaluate the markets one by one. We'll look at the charts. We'll talk about where each asset stands, where we're headed, and what kind of market conditions we're facing. But the chaos in the Middle East is clearly ongoing, and it doesn't look like it's going to end anytime soon. Look, after the rise in oil prices, there's now a growing fear around the world that the inflation trend might be coming back, that we might experience this trend again. And central banks have moved away from the rate cut corridor. And this was already defining a risk for all markets. Look, this is a topic I've especially talked about and emphasized, and over the last few months, my perspective has been to completely exit the US stock market, to completely exit Borsa Istanbul, to sell silver assets, and to stay away from new evaluations in ETFs. And we've discussed these points here many times. But among all these, I want to say that gold has faced more selling than I expected. Partial sell-offs are something I find quite normal, but there's been more selling in gold than I would usually expect. And, of course, I'm always in a position to say these things with peace of mind. Unlike some commentators who disable comments and turn a deaf ear when market conditions are bad, I actually do my own self-critique and personally tell you when I've been wrong or when things haven't gone as I expected. Now, when we get to the charts, we'll take a look. If you ask whether short-term mistakes will affect us in the medium term, in my opinion, they won't. We've been walking this path for a very long time. There have been a lot of things in the short term that we didn't expect or couldn't foresee, and there will be more in the future. But when I look at the markets in the medium term, when I check out who's done what and so on, we're the minority who are in the best position. This is a fact that I see very clearly, and only those who follow closely would know this. Now, first of all, when we look at the VIX index, in other words, the fear index, we see that it has come back up to the 30 level. What does this mean for us? Once it passes the 23 level, this index signals significant price volatility across all markets. And now that it has reached the 30 level, we've seen serious price swings in all markets. Of course, among these, Bitcoin and products in the cryptocurrency market showed less price volatility, because recently that was one of the places that had already seen the most selling. But outside of that, we're seeing significant selling pressure in the US stock markets, Borsa Istanbul, gold, silver, platinum, and palladium. Look, when we examine the American stock index, we see that the NASDAQ 100 chart is showing an index that has fallen below a significant support level. With the market closing today or tomorrow, it's very likely that we'll see even more selling pressure. In fact, over the last 4 months, the US stock market has gone through a serious period of stagnation with no gains, and during this time, getting out of American stocks turned out to be a good decision for me. A similar situation is happening with the S&P 500 as well. You can see that there's significant selling pressure there too. Today, the futures are trading below the 6,530 level. That's the latest situation we're seeing in the market. Of course, at the top of the list of reasons why these markets are under such heavy selling pressure is Trump, because Trump keeps making statements focused on destruction. Trump is making statements like, you'll see more destruction in Iran, we'll destroy their power plants, we'll wipe out Iran, and so on. After his statements, Iran tries to defend itself by saying, we'll turn the Middle East into a firestorm too. They're making statements like that. Of course, if we also consider that the Strait of Hormuz is closed and oil prices are on the rise, there's an atmosphere of anxiety in all the markets. But even in this tense environment, there are some simple moves investors can make. Among these simple moves, gold prices have dropped, gold prices have fallen more than we expected, and so on. In my opinion, investing in gold without getting overly anxious is a sensible option. When we say gold has dropped even more, this is actually an opportunity for investors. If it drops further, you can buy more gold and lower your average a bit more. Similar movements have been seen many times in the past. Of course, technically, gold has lost its rapidly rising positive trend. So here, with the loss of the $5,000 level, we saw it exit the positive zone. Well, this is the technical outlook. When we look at the situation in terms of fundamental news flow, in an environment where countries are this unstable and there are significant outflows from stock markets, in my opinion, gold is the first investment product to trust. For example, while explaining this, I told you that from my perspective, it doesn't make sense to take new positions or consider new positions in silver, platinum, or palladium. I mentioned that I don't hold positions in those, but I am carrying my positions in gold, and I will continue to hold them. The recent declines are a buying opportunity for me, and we will definitely see prices turn back upward from here. Look, when we look at silver, after it lost the $83 level at the ounce threshold, we clearly entered a downward trend again from a technical standpoint. Silver dropped all the way down to $61, and it had previously formed a peak area at exactly double that amount. Not 2 months ago, silver had reached $120. Actually, the same situation exists on the gold side from a technical perspective as well. But in my opinion, because of the war, the ongoing crisis in the Middle East, and central banks hitting the wall with interest rate cuts, gold will continue to be the #1 product that people will buy more of. Both individual investors, institutional investors, and central banks will continue to increase their gold holdings. Of course, when people ask about the reason behind the recent selling pressure, I've explained that both individual and institutional investors, as well as countries, have been selling their gold holdings through short-term profit-taking to meet their needs. Similarly, we've seen that Middle Eastern countries have also engaged in profit-taking within a short-term cycle. At the very least, we've seen speculation about this, but I didn't expect the correction in gold during these selling movements to be this deep. That's why I didn't take any action to sell. If I had taken action to sell, I would have gone completely into cash anyway, because I didn't make any additional investments with the cash I pulled out of the stock markets. Look, when we look at gold by the gram, it's one of the things local investors ask about the most. Gram gold is now returned to its price level at the beginning of the year. So gram gold wiped out its 3-month gains in this area, and telling new investors not to buy gold at such a lagging, weakened price level doesn't seem like a logical option to me. I don't see the American stock market or Borsa Istanbul following a very healthy trend in the upcoming period. I've already said that I won't be making new evaluations or short-term moves there. In my opinion, there really aren't that many alternatives to invest in anyway. That's why, after such a price drop, we can say that gram gold is now in a cheap price range. We could say the same thing for silver as well. It has also returned to the area where it hit bottom last month. When we look at the weekly charts, I think silver and Turkish lira terms has reached a good support level on the weekly time frame. A similar situation exists for gold and also for the ounce prices. So at this stage of the correction, I don't think there will be much more downward movement, nor do I believe these assets won't rise again. In short, with this recent drop, both gram silver and gram gold have, in my opinion, entered a price range that can be considered cheap. I think not only gram gold, but also gram silver has now entered a price range worth considering. By the way, through our partnership with Ledger, Cellcoin branded hardware wallets have been produced. And starting with this video, I'll be giving these hardware wallets away to my loyal followers in upcoming videos, gradually. We're kicking off these giveaways with this very video. We're starting to send Cellcoin branded hardware wallets to 2 people chosen from among my followers who like and comment on this video, and we'll continue these giveaways in the same way in future videos. And of course, for those who want to store their savings individually, don't want to keep them on exchanges, and are focused on the long term, I'm leaving hardware wallet links below the video. This week, they're 10% off. And I'd also like to mention that I've been using this product for about 9 years. I think using a personal wallet makes sense for long-term investments. Of course, the choice is entirely up to you. Look, we can also see that in the recent movements on Borsa Istanbul, there's been selling pressure there as well. I mentioned that around the 13,200 level, I was concerned about potential declines there as well, and the worries in the Middle East. So I sold everything and liquidated my assets in Borsa Istanbul. Borsa Istanbul dropped below exactly this level, and the selling pressure is still ongoing. During this period, I have no intention of making a new assessment in Borsa Istanbul. In other words, with the loss of the 12,600 level, I think Borsa Istanbul will enter a gap area all the way down to the lowest support level, ignoring the intermediate levels, down to the 11,500 level. It doesn't look like there will be a new support level. That's why I don't intend to make new assessments here. Look, we can clearly see an upward trend in oil as well. This was one of the areas that caused concern in global markets. On the chart we've been following for a long time, after breaking through $67 and then finding support around the $80 level, oil continues its upward movement. It looks like, within the current range, oil will probably target the $115 level again. For those following in the short term, they can watch the $92 and $95 levels as support. Of course, we get the chance to discuss all these markets in much more detail in the YouTube members chat. They know in more detail and depth when I sold on Borsa Istanbul, on which day I exited, and how and under what conditions I exited the US stock market, and they also get early notice about the new actions I plan to take. For example, when I said I sold on Borsa Istanbul, they were informed about these sales that very day. Of course, I'm not doing any stock speculation or anything like that. I'm talking about the usual direction of the markets, and while discussing these typical trends, I give examples from my own experience, which I believe are helpful for investors. Look, it's important to really understand and interpret this period well. As I mentioned at the beginning of the video, when you look at the markets and at people, take a look around and see who has made money during this period and how much they've made. Because when you look around, you'll see that the vast majority of investors haven't made money, and in fact have consistently lost money, a lot of money. If you look at it from a medium-term cycle perspective, investors are facing significant losses. I'm confident in saying that, under good market conditions, we're among the top earning minority, and when the markets are bad, we're among the minority who'd lose the least. That's exactly how I see things. I don't look at things as if prices have dropped today or this week. Where are we in the medium term, and where are we headed? 6 months ago, what was my situation, and where is my portfolio now? I do this accounting for myself. You should do your own accounting too, and invest accordingly. Look, when it comes to the cryptocurrency market, Bitcoin was partially affected by this global wind, but we can't really say it was hit that hard. It had already dropped. It was stuck in the $60,000 to $70,000 range. But just as it was about to catch a really nice trend last week, after Trump's statements and the tensions in the Middle East pulled all the markets down, we saw that Bitcoin also lost the 70,900 level. But the fact that it hasn't dropped to the lower levels again, that it hasn't fallen back to the $61,000 range, shows us that it's been heavily sold in its current area, and that it's now had enough of the selling pressure. And I think that in the coming days, Bitcoin will test the $70,900 level again and fight to stay above it. When we look at Tether dominance, after staying below the 8.11% level, it moved back up again. But still, it hasn't been able to break through a strong resistance zone. The fact that it can't break that resistance can actually be seen as a sign that selling pressure in the cryptocurrency market has reached a saturation point. In fact, let's not just talk about Bitcoin and the usual suspects. When we look at the chart we call Others, which shows the dominance of altcoins outside the top 10, we can see that the congestion at this critical threshold has increased significantly. Look, I had marked this area before. The battle to stay above this region is ongoing. And if in the coming days we see a trend where it loses the 7% level, only then can we talk about the global selling pressure spilling over into the cryptocurrency market. Right now, prices are making an effort to stay balanced. At least, that's how I see it. Other than that, there really isn't much more to add. We continue to monitor the markets, protect our positions, and adjust them according to the trends we follow. No matter what happens with prices, I hope you all stay in good spirits, friends. See you in the next video. Take care of yourselves. Subscribing to my channel and turning on notifications is an investment advice for yourself. See you again soon, with the intention of informing you about developments before they even happen.